Hey there. Okay, welcome to lecture 3. Today I'm going to talk about Kristen Zeiler's bringing the lived body to medical ethics education, learning to see the suffering of others. Okay, so in this chapter, what's going on? Zeiler suggests that virtue ethics can be combined with phenomenology to yield an improvement of moral perception in the context of medical ethics. Zeiler suggests that if medical professionals learn to relate to patients in the right ways, then this will result in an improvement in medical treatment. Zeiler suggests that one can become a virtuous healthcare professional by habituating the skills associated with medical treatment. There are three concepts that work in this chapter that I'm going to elaborate on for the rest of the lecture. They are phenomenology, virtue ethics, and moral perception. I'm going to basically explain what these things mean and how they fit together in the context of medical ethics. So, first off, crash course in virtue ethics. Virtue ethics has basically been around since the very beginning of philosophy. The first virtue ethicist was Aristotle in the Nicomachean Ethics, which was written as an educational guide to his son Nicomachus, on how to become a good human being. Now, virtue ethics is different than other forms of ethics in the sense that, like some forms, like Kantianism, which we talked about last week, are based on rules. Other kinds of ethic are like following the rule makes you a moral person, makes you a good person. Utilitarians, on the other hand, say that all of ethics comes down to a cost-benefit analysis sort of thing. Virtue ethicists have a different claim. Virtue ethicists and Aristotle claim that becoming a good person involves learning the right habits. What is a good person? A person who acts good. What is a person who acts good? A person who has the right habits, has the right character. Now, what we gotta keep in mind here, doing one right thing doesn't make you a good person, right? Like, if you hold the door open if there's a person who holds the door open for one old lady once when they're shopping at the Kroger, that doesn't mean this person is a good person. They might be a complete asshole all the rest of the time. Similarly, like, if there is a guy who does one noble action, but the rest of his life he's a complete jerk and does cruel and mean things, that one action doesn't necessarily redeem him. It's really not right to say that makes him a good person. At least that's what virtue ethicists hold. Perhaps the most famous quote from Aristotle's virtue or Nicomachean Ethics: "For one swallow does not make a summer, nor does one day, and so too one day or a short time does not make a man blessed and happy." If you want to be blessed and happy, which Aristotle says is a good person, then you gotta do it for your whole life. You gotta behave in the right way for your whole life. And this is how you achieve blessedness or happiness, eudaimonia. Good-spiritedness is another way to translate that word. Now, what is performing the good actions all the time? Well, Aristotle had a second claim of virtue ethics, that it is doing things in the right measure. Aristotle referred to this as the virtuous mean. Nothing in excess, nothing in deficiency. Just doing things to the right degree at all times. Now, like, the big quotation from Aristotle on this point is to perform the right actions for the right reasons at the right way at the right time. Now, the example is here of Aristotle's example, which in the Nicomachean Ethics, you could look it up sometime, is basically a person who, how much money do you give to a homeless person if you see a homeless person? Aristotle thinks, well, you gotta have the right motive. You want to actually help out the homeless person. You don't want to screw him over. Two, you got to do it at the right time. Like you got to figure out, okay, is this the time that would work best for this person? That would improve this person's life the most. And you got to give the right amount. Like giving a homeless person like a nickel is probably not going to do too much to aid his life. Similarly, giving him $37 billion is not going to yield the best results insofar as it'll probably bankrupt you if you have $37 billion to give away. So, for Aristotle, there are two claims about virtue ethics. One, it's habitual, and two, it's doing things in the right measure, performing actions in the right measure, which means not not deficiently and not in excess. So, Zeiler says that these two claims of virtue ethics basically amount to producing a moral perception. What is moral perception? Moral perception is essentially your gut feeling that you have to know when something is right or wrong. Okay, and here, like, the example is, morality, despite what utilitarians might say, and we might talk about them someday, is, a the right and wrong of an action is not something you calculate. What it actually is, it's something you know. And how do you know this? Not because you're following rules. This is against the Kantian. You know what is right and wrong from a lifetime of habituation. The virtuous person, according to contemporary virtue ethicists, is like the great athlete, the Olympian, who has internalized all the rules of the game and who knows how to act just naturally, out of habit. Think of like a great martial artist. Think of Babe Ruth hitting a ball over the far wall in a baseball game. Now, it's not like they were calculating, Babe Ruth was calculating the physics of the motion of the ball. He just practiced and practiced and practiced until he could perform actions without thought. Zeiler's big claim is that, look at, becoming a good doctor is learning how to do the right things without thinking about them. And this involves a lifetime of practice. Now, the third thing that we're going to get into. Phenomenology. Phenomenology is huge. Phenomenology is awesome. Phenomenology is basically a major philosophical movement that started in the late 19th century and defined most of European philosophy. Big phenomenological centers in the world, universities that teach this are Leuven, Belgium. In North America, Loyola University is really big for this. Carbondale University also has some great phenomenologists. Now, what does phenomenology basically say? It says, look at how we're going to figure out, in order to figure out the nature of reality, we're actually going to just simply look at how does reality become a content of consciousness? What are the relations, what are the operations involved there? Okay, like for example, how do I know this is a wonderful, awesome water bottle? Well, it becomes a representation to my mind. What are the steps, the logical steps that allow that to happen? Phenomenologists look at that. Maurice Merleau-Ponty was a huge phenomenologist in France, probably the most important phenomenologist in France in the late 20th century. Now, what does Merleau-Ponty say? Basically, Merleau-Ponty says, look at, he makes two huge claims. The first one, to perceive something is to recognize that it has a relation to me. So perception is not merely seeing things or hearing things. Perception is anything that I encounter, anything that becomes part of my lived world experience. I perceive the wind when it starts to affect my body in any way, shape, or form. Now, Zeiler has a wonderful quote about this on page 49. It's in the handout. I suggest you read it. The next big claim of phenomenology is, look at, when we actually perceive something, when we encounter something, it becomes part of our body in a strange sense. It becomes an extension of our body. When I hammer something, the hammer is not when I hammer a nail into the wood, the hammer does not become it's no longer a foreign object to me. It is an extension of my arm. It is the thing which is basically extends my capacities, and that's what phenomenology, or Merleau-Ponty's phenomenology, those are the two big claims. One, perception is recognizing that anything is in relation to my body. Two, anything in relation to my body is basically an extension of my body. This breaks down the dichotomy between I and thou, between you and me, between subject and object. Basically, these things are together. Now, in one world. Now, Merleau-Ponty has a lot about this. Probably the most important thing is his two most important books are Phenomenology of Perception and The Visible and the Invisible. Either which could give you a good primer on what he's talking about. But, how do we take phenomenology and relate it to medical ethics? Well, the claim here is, or Zeiler's claim is, look at, if we start to recognize patients as part of my lived experience, if the doctor, the healthcare professional starts to recognize that they are part of my lived experience, then this will yield big changes to the medical ethics as we know it. And these changes are, one, it will change the way healthcare professionals get trained, in the senses that medical training will emphasize both theoretical and practical knowledge. Two, it will change the way healthcare professionals relate to patients, in the sense that the new patient will not be regarded as an alien object, but as a suffering other whose needs are attended to. Okay, that's the big takeaway. Zeiler's paper states that a phenomenological education will habituate medical practices, and this will make you a good healthcare professional. A good healthcare professional has internalized the skill set of medical professionals, and this will entail a rigorous education, and it will herald a new way of dealing with patients, recognizing them not as some alien other, but as a human being that is not so separate from the healthcare professional in the sense that they share the same world. Alrighty, that is it for today's lecture. The study question should be online. Please answer it. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.